Good morning, fellow streakers. Hopefully everyone is doing absolutely fantastic out there this morning, if you're listening in the morning.
It is a good morning. We're still in Georgia, and it is beautiful today, and it has lifted my spirits.
The birds have been chirping in Georgia.
Birds have been
it's
chirping.
Gorgeous out there.
The daffodils are blooming.
We're excited about our topic for today, aren't we?
We are super excited about our topic
Jamie
today.
has had a streak to identify at least one TED Talk to listen to.
I know,
I had to think about it for a second because it was...
Listen to one TED Talk a week, and then I missed it enough times that I reevaluated and thought, okay, let's start more simple. Did you notice how I said that? Let's start more simple, because I've learned through my streaking experiences that sometimes it takes me longer to bring something to a conscious level than what I wanted it to take, and that it's okay to make it even more simple and give myself time to be thinking about it.
I think that we sometimes have expectations of ourselves that are unrealistic.
I think so too. And also sometimes expectations that we think other people have on us, or like I was a little embarrassed to think I had to change my streak from listen to one TED Talk a week to pick a TED Talk one time a week.
And you were embarrassed because, and just riffing in here on this, no one else knew that you had this. And so no one else was understanding it, but you were still, not yet. You hadn't, I knew you had it because we usually share all of our streaks with each other, but it's not like anyone in the world knew anything about it except now, where we have
that I've
thousands of listeners that are out there and, hey, Jamie has a streak now and she had to change it.
She had to make it more simple, but it was good for me. I'm grateful, having done this for 5 years now, to be able to recognize that it wasn't that I was lacking in something per se, that it wasn't that I just, wow, I can't even listen to one TED Talk a week.
Right.
It was recognizing that when I'm adding something new to what I'm adding to my life, that it's okay that it take a little bit of time to bring it from this subconscious, occasional thought of, oh, I want to stay informed, and listening to TED Talks is kind of a cool way to do that, to actually adding it to my life. And that where I thought I could start was, I can listen to a TED Talk once a week, recognizing that even that was a little bit more challenging than what I thought it was going to be. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't that I wanted to get rid of the streak, because I did look at that and evaluate it and think, do I want to get rid of it?
Right.
But it was that, I thought, well, before I get rid of it, I think I'm going to try and make it even simpler.
Yeah.
So anyway, our whole discussion today is based on a TED Talk that I did listen to.
And for those of you who are just joining us for the first time, which we have, it's amazing how many hundreds of more people and thousands of people we have each week. This conversation, or what Jamie and I do, is we talk about streaking. And streaking, not like common belief, is something different. Streaking is, and for all of you who have been listening for a long time or are going to be able to answer this question, is the simple practice of conscious, consistent actions that create life-changing results. And we follow the laws of streaking, which are law number 1, make it laughably simple. Law number 2, no record, no streak. And law number 3 is to create a community. And that's the context of what it is we talk about. So if you're just joining us for the first time, welcome. We're glad to have you. And as you listen, you may want to go back and listen to some of the previous episodes. You're joining us mid-conversation. We're talking about all kinds of things in all kinds of different arenas, and mainly not just the concept and methodology of streaking, but also how you apply it. So this month, in the month of February, we have chosen to talk about relationships and how you apply streaking to relationships. We started out with marriage, talking about how you might apply streaking to marriage. Then we moved on to family and children, parenting, how you might apply it there, and then into other relationships, friendships and work associates or work relationships, professional, personal relationships. And now the next two podcasts that we're going to do together are based in this particular study that Jamie found while she was doing her streak. And that is, we've really built this one up, haven't we? Because we haven't said what it is yet. Nope. And we will in just a second. I want to say one more thing about your streak that I think is cool. And that is, it is in line with who you want to be. And who you want to be is someone that's continually learning. Mm-hmm. And because you want to be continually learning, you have been looking for what you need to do in order to be that type of person. So you have, for example, this one, find at least one TED Talk to listen to weekly. You have a couple of others as well. And I'm trying to remember what they are right off the top of my head. But
I have my geography streak that I look at that's kind of helping me to continue learning. Do something with geography every day.
And it could be as simple as...
I think that's how I...
Is that how you word it?
How do I word it?
Do at least one thing with geography daily.
Practice/learn geography at least once daily.
And on previous podcasts, we've talked a lot about that. In fact, we will probably talk about that coming up. Honestly, we have a great podcast that's coming up in the month of March. We're interviewing a 5th grade teacher that has applied streaking not only to her own life, but also in her classroom, which we're excited about that one. But that one could be around education as well.
Exactly.
So without further ado, should we get going on this?
Yes, let's get
Or did
going.
You have another thought?
No, I'm great. Let's get going.
So the TED Talk is, do you want to tell them what TED Talk you listen to?
So this was the title of it, which is what caught my attention. What makes a good life? Lessons from the longest study on happiness.
So that caught your attention, and just a little bit of flavor behind why that one caught your attention, because you scroll through quite a few TED Talks before you land on the one that you want to listen to.
This one was, well, first of all, it had 37 million views.
37 million.
37 million views.
That's a few views.
That's a few views. I also think, aren't we all attracted to the question, what makes a good life?
I think so.
I
don't think I wake up in the morning and think, wow, I wonder what I could do to make my life awful.
How can I ruin my life today? No, we wake up and think, okay, how can I make this better? What can I do to make my life better today?
And some of us wake up with a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry and concern. I know that I've been doing that of late just because of the move to Colorado. How are we going to get everything done? How are we going to put it all together? And
how are our kids going to do? How are we going to do? All those,
all the worries and concerns of life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm just sorry. I just got into thinking about that.
We just went anxious. We're okay. So this talk was given in November of 2015. It's a TED Talk, and it's by Robert Waldinger, who is actually
He's the director of
director of this study.
Of the study, and a psychiatrist at Massachusetts General Hospital, and a professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School.
Yes.
So he's got quite the cred.
He does have cred. Lots of credibility there.
He is. He's got street
3
cred.
or 4 comma delineated creds.
Yes.
So
what's great about this? So Jamie and I have read. We've both listened to this. We've both read it, and we've talked a little bit about it. But you are joining us in the conversation right now.
Right now.
I mean, we've not gone into depth on it, but
that's what I was going to say. I've wanted to go in and actually research the actual study, but I haven't had time to do that yet.
Right.
But I've loved this TED Talk, and he does go into it. So the study is 75 years old. So what they did is they studied, where is it, the number of?
It's 724 men.
So they picked 724 men.
Now, I read a little bit more into that.
I know
did? Here, yeah. Well, it said that the reason that they picked 724 men is because Harvard at the time only accepted men.
Really?
Yes, and so they only chose men because they were looking at Harvard men, and they looked at the 2 groups of people. It was Harvard men, and also that were sophomores, and then a group of inner city men that grew up in the hardest of circumstances.
Yes.
So they wanted both groups to be able to see, those that were privileged as to those who were underprivileged.
And so that that they could see if that was making a difference in the study. Do you know what year it started?
1938.
Wow, that's awesome. 1938.
Yeah, I think it was, and that's what 1938 is what I read, and it wasn't in the TED Talk. It was, they actually have the study published, and I just read, and I think it was 1938 is when they started it. Yep.
Because it was right before World War II.
Right.
And so it talks about how many of these young men graduated from Harvard and then enlisted and went into.
And what's amazing about this study, and Dr. Waldinger points this out, is that it is the longest continuous study. So it's a streak.
Yeah.
That's why we like it.
That's why we like it.
That's why you were attracted to it, is it's a streak study.
And it said that it's very rare that they're able to have a study this long because of variables that come into play. They lose funding, or the person that has the passion behind the study, dies or passes away, and nobody picks up the passion and carries it forward.
Right.
So it's amazing that they've been able to keep this study alive for 75 years. And Robert Waldinger is actually the fourth director of this study.
Of the study.
So it's gone through 4 generations of directors.
There it is, since 1938. Sorry, it is in the TED Talk right there
job.
at the top. So, and I'm going to read just a little bit about who they tracked, because we discussed it, but I want to read who they tracked. It says, lives of 2 groups of men. The first group started in the study when they were sophomores at Harvard College. They all finished college during World War II, and then most went off to serve in the war. And the second group that we followed was a group of boys from Boston's poorest neighborhoods, boys who were chosen for the study specifically because they were from some of the most troubled and disadvantaged families in the Boston of the
1930s.
Oh, got it. In the Boston of the 1930s. Most lived in tenements, many without hot and cold running water.
So you had some diversity in economic status of the groups of men that they chose to study.
Right. And I think that is significant, because what that does is normalize the study in a way to say, is what we found true across all spectrums?
Well,
because, go ahead, you were going to say.
Well, I was going to say, it's interesting because he starts off this TED Talk by saying that they did a survey of millennials,
right,
and asking them what their goals are, their life goals. And he said 80% of them, over 80% that responded to this survey, said that a major life goal for them was to get rich. So of the people they surveyed, 80% of the people, their life goal as they're, coming out of high school into college, entering that time where you're making all the decisions about where your life want to go, 80% of them felt that their major life goal was to get rich.
Can I be fully transparent? That was mine.
I think, yeah.
I mean, I had the goal to be independent of outside sources of income by the time I was 45 years old. I think that's kind of get rich.
Yes, I think so too.
It's a different way to say it, but.
And so I think what he was saying in this, and then he said of those 80%, 50% of those same young adults said that another major life goal was to become famous. And so he talks about as they followed.
That was my secondary goal.
Was that it? I want to be rich and famous. What's your goals in life? Rich, famous.
Rich and famous.
and we're told that I think there's a lot of things out there telling us that that's what's going to make you happy.
Right.
And so we enter the world and we're like, I need money and I need people to like me, and that's what's going to make me happy.
And honestly, just being completely transparent and showing my shallowness of character, I look at it, and when I was in that mode, I thought, well, how could it not? I mean, sorry, but money makes a lot of things easier.
Right.
And fame, it seems to bring with it its own type of wonderful, in other words, you get entitlements. So I know I'm not famous, so I don't know this, and I'm not rich, so I'm just guessing.
But we look at those rich and famous people and think
the life is perfect. They're happy all the time. Everything is bliss. However,
and even in that, I mean, thinking about, okay, I want to be rich. At what point is a person considered rich? It really is relative to your background and your circumstances and what you've had and haven't had.
Good point.
I mean, there isn't a magic number. Well, maybe there is. I guess millionaires, maybe people are like, if you're a millionaire,
I don't know.
You are rich.
I don't know if that's the case.
I don't know either.
And the reason why I don't know if that's the case is because when you think about being rich, I mean, you could not be a millionaire and still be rich in the sense that you have no debt, you have you have your needs taken care of.
Right.
You've got food, you've got clothing, you've got shelter.
And you've got it all taken care of.
And you've got it all taken care of. And you don't need to depend on outside sources of income in order to provide that lifestyle. So someone who owns a van that travels around and they can be fully
self-sufficient.
Self-sufficient and rich.
Right.
I mean, they may be. However, what we found, though, is that in the study, and we'll talk about this, that didn't make a difference as far as happiness is concerned.
I think that's why they started off by saying we took some of the most, if you're at Harvard in the 1930s,
typically you're privileged.
You've had
and
some
anyone that goes to
influence.
Harvard,
yes.
usually you're not going
you've had
because...
some help getting there.
Right.
Compared to those that are living in tenements without hot and cold running water, coming at life at a much significant disadvantage.
Exactly.
It says, when they entered the study, all of these teenagers were interviewed. They were given medical exams. We went to their homes and we interviewed their parents. And then these teenagers grew up into adults who entered all walks of life. They became factory workers and lawyers and bricklayers and doctors. One president of the United States.
Do you know who it was?
I
do.
Who is it?
Should I say? I don't know. He doesn't say here. JFK.
JFK was part of the study.
Part of the study.
That makes sense.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
A Harvard man. A Harvard man.
Some developed alcoholism. A few developed schizophrenia. Some climbed the social ladder from the bottom all the way to the very top. And some made that journey in the opposite direction. So I love that he's saying all of these things. I mean, we were able to watch these individuals, these men, from the time they were teenagers in these very diametrically opposed walks of life, all the way up into, he said there's still, how many of them that there's still 75 years later, they still have about 60 men that are in the study, but they're all in their 90s.
Yeah. Well, and they said, I love this. He said every 2 years, the researchers would call and ask a series of questions, or would set up a series of questions. And he says, many of the inner city Boston men ask us, why do you keep wanting to study me? My life just isn't that interesting. The Harvard men never asked that question.
I know. I thought that was funny too.
I thought that was great.
They never asked that.
Quite the self-confidence there.
But I've loved that, and this is something that Dr. Waldinger says too, is that the ability to have a view of these people's life so expansive, of to be able to look at their whole life, is pretty amazing. And he says it's nearly impossible to get. Most of the time when you're asking about these things, you're depending on people's memory of these past experiences, remembering how they felt. And this is something that I thought was interesting. I heard of a book recently that was written about somebody. And in this book, this person had kept a journal every single day of their life. So the book, the way it was written, was able to express the way that the person felt in that moment. It wasn't the person looking back on his life and explaining how he felt, because we forget or we change it maybe a little bit. Do you know what I mean, in our minds?
Well, I think that memory is fallible. And we know that because that's why the second law of streaking is so significant.
Exactly.
You have no record, you have no streak.
Because we can't remember.
Cannot remember. I mean, that is one of the things, just taking a tangent into streaking methodology for a second, is you take that path down, no record, no streak. There's many people, when we introduce streaking to them for the first time, said, oh, I have a streak. And then they say, well, I don't know, I may have broken it a couple times.
Exactly.
That's because you just don't have a memory of it. And so the ability, coming back now on the road, the ability to have a record of these events in these men's lives was significant, to be able to know what actually was happening in the moment. What was the book that you were reading that...
I actually can't remember the title of it, and that's why I didn't say. I'll go back and
I'm really
figure that
interested
out.
in it, yeah, because
I'll go back.
I think that's an interesting work.
Well, it was just interesting to have a book written about a person where they had access to their journals, so they could actually read how the person felt in the moment of the experience, not looking back on it 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years later, and trying to remember how you felt. Because no matter what, how you feel in the moment of something is one thing, but that looking back on it after you've had the experiences, or after you know how it's going to turn out, it changes the way that you view that event. No matter what, it's impossible to not have it change the way you view that event as compared to how you viewed it in the moment.
We always call that the filters. You know, you set up your own filters in life, and the filters that you're doing are using in order to understand your life, what it was and what it is going forward.
Yep.
So going back to this study. Oh, we're going to have to do this on another one.
Well, I was thinking, I thought, let's introduce kind of what the 3 things of the study were. And then in our next podcast, we can talk about more in depth so can we give them should we just go to the end of the study?
No, I don't think so. We'll give you the end of the study. We'll do it in the next podcast. So, but here's I think go through the 3 things that you wanted to talk about. Okay, so there's
3 things that they learned. The big thing that they learned.
Oh, you wanted to tell them that one?
Yes.
The huge one. Now, this is the big reveal.
The big reveal.
After all studying and everything else, what he says. Go ahead.
So what we have learned, what have we learned? He asked the question of all of this data that they've kept for 75 years. What have they learned?
And we'll get to that on the next podcast. No, I'm kidding.
What are the lessons that come from tens of thousands of pages of information that we've generated on these lives? Well, the lessons aren't about wealth or fame or working harder or harder. The clearest message that we get from this 75-year study is, dun, 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 good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. That's how he says it.
So pause right there. Good relationships keep us happier and healthier.
And then he wrote, period. That's it. I mean, of everything that they learned from this study, they were able to boil it down. Whether you were Harvard or you started off in a tenement without running hot and cold water, it was the same. It boiled down to that good relationships are what make us happier and healthier.
I think that, that is, that's pretty significant.
It's very significant.
And especially as we talk about in this month, as we talk about relationships, the happier, healthier the happier, healthier person has good relationships. I mean, that's a whole new level.
So what we wanted to talk about is that they spend the rest of the time talking about what they learned, and we'll talk more about that in our next podcast. But we're going to talk a lot about how can streaking help your relationships.
And I think that what you just said is critical because of all of this, there is one sentence dedicated to how you make better relationships. How you do things. And it's just one sentence. And I think that what you and I are going to discuss as we go through and talk about the main points of what they found as far as why it's relationships, then we could talk about the bulk of the time saying how you do this.
How do you do this? Because it's so fascinating. They've spent 75 years figuring out the what. Mm-hmm. And now that is a blessing to know the what. I mean, now we can look at it and say, okay, through this study, they've learned that what helps us be happy in life are the relationships that we have.
So we'll talk about how on our next podcast. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining this first part of the conversation. Part one
of a two-parter.
We hope that you'll join us on our next one where we'll talk about the how, because the how is critical. If in the interim you want to ask us a question or share with us a streak that you have building relationships, go ahead and let us know at Jeffrey, Jeffery, at streakingmastery.com or
Jamie, Jami, at streakingmastery.com.
Until we talk with you again,
keep streaking.
Keep streaking.
It's the small and simple things that make the life we live worth living. Among the rush, do one push up, become a better you. It's the small and simple things that make you grow into what you're hoping.